everyone, welcome back to Teen Stock. I'm your host Dream, and today's episode is about something that affects a lot of people but isn't always understood: eating disorders. But this isn't just about body image or dieting. Sometimes eating disorders can be connected to a person's body accessibility, meaning their body physically limits what they can eat. For some, food isn't a choice, it's a challenge. Whether due to a medical condition, food sensitivities, or something deeper, navigating life with these struggles can be exhausting, both physically and emotionally. That's why I'm so grateful to have today's guest with me, Mara Koto. She's here today to share her personal experience. What is it really like to live with an eating disorder that isn't about weight, but about what her body can or cannot tolerate? Hey Mara, how are you doing? Welcome to Teen Stock.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm so glad to have you here with me today. So let's start with this. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who's Mara?
I'm a grade 10 student and I changed schools. I changed to this school in grade 9.
Yeah.
And I've always lived in Maputo, Mozambique.
So when did you start realizing that food was a challenge for you? Was there a specific moment where it became clear that it wasn't just a picky eating or something, but was something more than that?
So right now I'm recovered from my eating disorder.
Yeah.
But when it started, I was still at my old school, and
How old were you?
I was in grade 8.
Yeah.
I was in grade 8, and it was middle of grade 8, and I had been like a picky eater, as you
Yeah.
said, but not picky as in trying to restrict certain foods that I didn't like or that I thought weren't healthy or something like that. It was more about knowing that I can go this amount of time without eating or without eating the things that most people love to eat, you know.
Mhm.
But I don't think there was really a moment where I understood that it was a problem, because it happened after a very traumatic event in my life. And that's what caused me to hate myself. That's where it started from.
Yeah.
I was in a state of self-hatred that I just wanted to punish myself in whatever way I could find. And that's when eating became a way of punishing myself and proving to others that I'm not worthy of life, because food is a way of living, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
You cannot
It's a
live
basic
without
need.
eating.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it was only when there was medical intervention that I realized that it wasn't okay.
So we know that a lot of people assume eating disorders are just about wanting to be a thinner or like having that ideal body shape, right? But like that's not always the case, if you agree with me. So can you talk about what your experience has been like and how it's different from the stereotypes people might have?
So, as I said in the last answer,
Yeah.
my eating disorder sparked because of a traumatic event in my life.
So it wasn't about your body shape or something,
No,
right?
I'd always had a bit of self-image issues, you know, with peer pressure, and all the girls at my old school were so
Yeah.
much thinner and prettier, and I always felt this need to be like them
Yeah.
ever since I was young. But that wasn't what caused my eating disorder, because even as I said before, I had always been a picky eater in a
Yeah.
way, and that was because I wanted to be thin. But my actual eating disorder had nothing to do with that.
Yeah,
It was
yeah, yeah.
just about
So you,
being
before you
depressed.
realized kind of your eating disorder was to have to kind of fit in that self-image or something like that?
What?
Before you kind of know that you have that eating disorder, so when you were a picky eater, was it because of your body image or the way that you look,
Yeah.
maybe?
It was a mixture of, because I wanted to be thinner,
Yeah.
but also because I wanted, because we know that diet culture, they validate not eating and eating healthy,
Yeah.
healthy, you know,
Yeah,
as what they categorize as healthy.
But it's not actually healthy.
Yeah,
right?
exactly, and a very important point.
Yeah.
It was this mixture of wanting to be validated by diet culture because it makes you feel good when someone asks you, "Oh, do you eat breakfast?" and you say, "No, I don't eat breakfast." It feels like it's cool or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
And there was this constant glamorization of not eating, which should not be normalized at all. So it was
Yeah.
a mixture of those two things.
Do you think for some things it's a way to get attention, maybe?
Yes, that's a very important point. For me, my eating disorder was about hating myself, but inside me, I still wanted to live. I didn't want to die. It wasn't
The will of dying, right?
yeah, it wasn't that. It was just a way to make myself, because I was really sad on the inside,
Yeah.
but no one could see that. So I had to put that sadness on the outside so that others could see that I was struggling.
Yeah.
And that was a call for attention. And wanting to get attention is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Attention seeking is not at all being picky or being whatever stereotype there is about that, because it's wanting the attention that you're not getting, and it's a human need.
You need to
We
get
need
attention.
we need to talk, we need to speak, we need to be heard. And
Yeah.
I didn't feel heard, so it was a way of getting attention.
Do you think you still have that self-hate, or it's now better?
The self-hate I had was very related to that traumatic event that I went through. And after I got medical attention, I started working with a therapist to work about um, moving on from that traumatic event. So as I start moving on from that past event is when I start forgiving myself more and learning to move on. It's very important.
Didn't you maybe had that kind inner voice where it said that Mara is actually a good person, like I don't need to punish myself because I'm good, like why am I punishing myself? Have you been through this stage maybe? In some during that station?
Yes, I've always really tried to be a kind person. I've always thrived to make a
To
good
others or to
impact
yourself?
on the world, and
Yeah.
maybe a bit too much.
Yeah.
I was a bit too much of a people pleaser and trying to put everyone's needs before mine. So when I couldn't help other people, and that's actually what happened in my traumatic event, that I wasn't able to help, but it wasn't my place to help.
Yeah.
It was a doctor's place, and that guilt that I felt for not healing that person, that is what caused me to hate myself, because I couldn't help them.
Do you think you are kind to yourself now? I mean, at this stage.
I think I am.
Yeah.
It can still be hard to forgive myself for what happened, but working with a therapist has really changed my life. And also changing schools was very important for me, because when you're in a certain mindset for so long and everyone around you knows that you're in that mindset, it's really hard to get out, because everything that you see surrounding you
Yeah.
reminds you of that and feels like you can't get out now, you're too far deep.
Yeah.
So changing schools and going outside of the country for a bit really helped me.
So I think you have a little link to the question that I'm going to ask. So maybe just having an eating disorder is actually a struggle not only with meals, but maybe with social life, with emotions and self-esteem, as you have mentioned, right? So what has been the hardest part for you? Maybe you mentioned your traumatic event or that when you were in grade 8, but what was the hardest time or the hardest moment that you remember?
The hardest moment, it was, okay, this is going to sound a bit like a cycle that doesn't make sense, but when you're in that state of mind, nothing makes sense.
Yeah.
So I hated myself because I felt like a bad person. And
Because you were not able to help others?
yeah, because I wasn't able to help other people. And because I hated myself, I started developing an eating disorder as a way to punish myself
Yeah,
for
yeah.
that. But that also affected my parents and my family, and I lost many friends, and I felt also guilty and bad for doing this to my parents, for seeing my mom crying and everything. It was really hard
Yeah.
to put them through this and not feel guilty, because doctors tell you it's not your fault. It's a mental illness, you know,
Yeah.
it's you don't choose to have it.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was very hard to hate myself and punish myself, causing
Punish maybe the others or
punishing the others
yeah.
and hating myself for punishing the others. So then I punished myself again, and it was this vicious cycle that I felt. That's why you generally feel like you can't get out, because every thought that you have circles back. It circles
Overthinking.
back
Yeah,
over
yeah.
everything, and the conclusion is always you're the problem,
Yeah.
and that's why it's so hard.
Have you maybe? So, okay, you mentioned several times that, like, because of this punishing yourself, but did you reach to a point where you said, actually, I think I mentioned it earlier, but like, it's actually not my fault. What, like, it's not actually, I'm not the problem. I didn't do anything wrong. It's something happened and it just happened and it's not my fault anymore, right? And maybe what were some of the strategies that you used to make yourself like, okay, calm down, it's okay, like, nothing that much.
So there are certain things that really helped me to recover from my eating disorder and
Yeah.
from hating myself.
Yeah.
And a lot of the media we consume really feeds into those mindsets. For example, when I was in my eating disorder, all the media I consumed was about how to eat the least as possible, how to exercise, and all of
Yeah,
these.
yeah.
But when I started recovering, I started focusing on reading. For example, I read this book called Unbound. It's a poetry book. I don't remember the author, but it was very, very inspiring for me at the time. And I started focusing on feeding myself with good videos about reasons why you should recover, and listen to people telling you about how much better life really does get after you choose to end it.
Yeah. So, have you been in some situations where you felt that you are being judged or misunderstood because of your eating disorder?
Yeah, my all maybe not all, but a lot of my family knew when I had an eating disorder, and not a lot of them really understood it.
Yeah.
Especially like my grandparents who are older,
Yeah, yeah.
and all they've heard about it is that they're not eating to be thin. And that wasn't really the case for me. And
Yeah.
even when I was recovering, I was doing it with my parents. We were on board with everything, and it wasn't something that I did just by myself.
Yeah.
So my parents knew, and my grandparents would sometimes come up to me and say, "You're really hurting your parents. Don't keep doing this." And I was already in recovery, and I knew that I was hurting my parents. So I actually mentioned
But it
this
wasn't your
before.
fault, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it just made me feel even worse than I already did. But eventually you just have to understand that you don't have anything to prove to anyone. You are living your own life, and if people understand you, they do. If they don't, they don't. And what you do with your life is it's what matters.
Yeah.
And you don't want to waste it doing something to prove something to someone else.
And maybe that you are not the problem.
Yeah, you're not the problem. I promise you are not the problem
Yeah.
at all.
So maybe this question link a little bit to the one before, but like we know that sometimes we get to be not forced, but like we get to be put in certain situations where we sit with family or like with friends or everything. So and there can be some people that are sitting, they could have some tricky reactions, right? So have you ever felt them or like handled those moments?
So I have a grandparent
Yeah.
who is the icon of diet culture. You know, she's always, oh, but if you eat one carrot, you're already full for the day. And
Oh.
oh, if you do this, I'm gonna have to run 10 miles to burn this off.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
all of those things. And it felt like it only got worse when she found out about my eating disorder. Every time that we were together, she'd say something.
Yeah.
I already went there expecting, what is she gonna say this time?
Yeah.
And it wasn't easy at all. But
Mm.
I talked to my parents, and my parents talked to her, and it made it much easier. And it also, what also really helped is that me and my parents, we built a really strong relationship as when after they found out that I had an eating disorder, because they wanted to support me in every way possible. So we became a strong community,
Yeah.
us, you know.
Strong family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we focused a lot on being with each other, and I'm not saying that this is a solution, but for me it was indeed really helpful to not be with a lot of other family members, because I didn't want them to see me the way that I was. And because every time they look at me differently, because
Yeah.
it was noticeable, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And they would always be focusing on seeing what I'm eating in family lunches, because of course, they wanted to know that I was starting to get better, but it felt a lot of pressure because everyone looking at you eating after you feel so embarrassed about eating for so long.
Yeah.
It 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 helped me a lot to
Just stay with your
distance
small
myself
family. Yeah.
from other families.
So what role, like how, or let me phrase it in another way, was like how important the existence of your parents during this journey was?
It was, I couldn't have done it without them. As I said, I didn't really realize that I had a problem. It just sort of, people around me started noticing. So it has to do with that attention that you were talking about. I started getting that attention. But at that moment, this is the thing about eating disorders. When you start, it can be about getting attention that you're not okay, you want help, but you feel like you don't deserve to say that you want help. So you have to make them aware in another way.
Yeah, which is eating disorder.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, when you get deep into the eating disorder, you start, your mind kind of turns around. You're doing this for yourself now, because you close down. When you're so focused on food, everything is about food, everything is about your body, everything is about that. So no one else really becomes your focal in life. So when someone tries to get in between your relationship with being skinny, it feels like they're evil. They're trying to ruin your plans. You know, you already had plans of what you were gonna do today, to do this and that, and someone comes and says, "No, you have to stop." You're like, "Why?" You know, and this is why it's so hard to get out. So it was really important, and I genuinely think that there is a moment of like a switch to everyone, where they just switch and realize that this is not a life, and this is not, no one should go through this, because most people with eating disorders don't wish it upon anyone else besides them. So it's a moment of realizing that you're also human, and you don't deserve to go through it, just as your family and friends wouldn't deserve.
Yeah. So, what's something you wish people knew about living with an eating disorder that isn't about dieting or body image?
I wish people would know that it's miserable, because it's not just because you don't eat the things that you enjoy and because you're so focused on your body. It's because you stop talking to people, you stop having energy to do your hobbies, you start getting health issues and can't do physical exercise. You can't even go outside without having supervision because what if you pass out, sorry. But if you pass out or pass away, that's also a very strong possibility. And it's just so many other things that come with it that people don't consider when they are thinking of starting
Yeah.
to restrict, because people think, okay, I don't eat, I get skinny, then I'll start eating, I'll stay skinny. And it's not like that. And it's just, there's so many other things that go into it that people don't realize that really are what make your life miserable. It's not the eating part that makes you miserable, it's the self hatred, and it's the isolation, and the way you feel so alone and you feel so crazy. You feel crazy because your mind just keeps going in circles about everything and you can't get out.
Yeah. So, looking back at this maybe hard, I don't know, difficult journey, is there something you have learned about yourself through it?
Yes, I've generally learned that I am human
Yeah.
and I am responsible for my own life above anything, and that my health is the most precious thing that I have. Because uh, I live in Mozambique, and less developed country, and I know that many people don't get as many opportunities as I do, and many people don't have the same health conditions that I do, and I'm lucky to have that. And I should live for a life, not for a body. Because when you're living for a body, you change your whole lifestyle to fit into that. You change your diet, your relationships, your friends, your family, everything changes.
Yeah.
But when you live for a life,
You don't care.
you don't, yeah, exactly. You only aim for a feeling of happiness, and everything will be the way it's supposed to be. You will eat what you want and what feels good. You will have the body that you are supposed to have, because everyone's healthy looks different. And we can eat the same and our bodies will still look different. And even if we don't eat the same, our bodies need different amounts of different foods. And that is beautiful. That is beautiful. And you can appreciate a body on someone else, but that doesn't mean that it should be yours, that you should have it too. That you're not pretty if you don't have it. You are just as valid, you're just as human, because at the end of your life, you're not
Yeah.
going to look back and be thankful that you didn't go out with your friends for dinner, or that you spent so many years or days or weeks or months hating yourself. You're going to be left with your memories, and you should make the most out of them while you can, because next week is not promised. And you wouldn't want to spend your last week restricting and hating
Yeah.
yourself. And
Yeah.
you have the choice. You have the choice to get out. So get out. Do it.
Thank you so much for this great conversation.
Thank you,
I
Rina.
think it's so important because it shows that eating disorders, maybe from your experience, aren't always the same and they look different for different people, right?
Exactly.
And whether it's about the body image, medical conditions, or something else, it's a real struggle that deserves understanding and support. Thank you so much again, Mara,
Thank you,
for
Rina.
opening up and sharing your journey with us. Your honesty and perspective will definitely help others feel less alone in this experience. I believe so.
Thank
To
you,
anyone out there who feels like their experience with food isn't understood, your struggles are valid and you are not alone. It's okay to ask for support, to set boundaries, and to take things at your own pace. And for all of you who are listening, thank you for being part of this conversation. If this episode resonates with you, make sure to share it with someone who might need to hear it. Until next time, take care, be kind to yourself, and remember your experiences matter. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.